Hey everyone, how are you doing today? Hope that the new year has been doing alright for you. Even though the beginning of the new year doesn't feel any different to the previous day, because it's not, I've always found it to be a holiday that celebrates new beginnings. So, to start us off, it's that time of the month again, back in telling you all a new story. I'm just gonna skip past the usual build-up because you can all probably read the title and figure out what the story is about my first ever trip to Cedar Point this past summer. Okay, quick question. Why are all my stories either about partying or theme parks? I've noticed that pattern recently and I have no idea why, but that's besides the point. So sit down and grab yourself a Coke. I've got something to tell you. Since there really is no way of transitioning into this, I'm just going to start off from the second that we left the house. So our trip begins with my family and I leaving the house because we would be driving there instead of taking a plane or anything else. I remember the early May morning when we had left. I was so tired, but still super excited to finally go. I'm riding in the back seat, we all have our luggage placed into the back, I've got my phone and some earbuds so that I can basically just listen to music and zone out the entire ride. Everything was going to be fine. That was, until about a few hours in. You see, the drive to Ohio is actually surprisingly long from my house, and that wasn't aided by the amount of traffic that we had to deal with. So, about a few hours in, I'm already bored and kind of sick of the road and just want to lie down for a few hours. We're driving along the road in some hot-ass weather, passing by all these rest stops with really gross bathrooms. It was a nightmare. That all changed, of course, when we actually got there. I remember staring out the window as we were passing through this small town with buildings on either side, and looking across the lake to see the spaghetti-tangled amalgamation of rides, coasters. It was beautiful. Just seeing that skyline would rekindle anyone's day, honestly. So we go through the gate of the park and head to our hotel. The hotel that we were staying at was called the Briggers, which, for those of you who don't know, is the hotel that's basically right outside the park. After finding a spot to park, we started heading for the door to check in and were met with what was going to be the biggest foe of our entire trip. Because the moment that we step onto the sidewalk, we are immediately attacked by these things called mayflies. These annoying pieces of shit were everywhere during the trip, and right outside the main entrance of the hotel was just a swarm of them that immediately came after us. There must have been hundreds just waiting there for any single person to come by so that they could hone in on them like some miniature fighter jet. As someone who kind of hates bugs, this was actually the worst. But once we went inside, we were safe again. So we check in, go back outside to get attacked again so that we could grab our luggage, and then head to our rooms, which are already ready, surprisingly enough. We walked into the room with the windows open, showing the amazing view of the tallest roller coasters, the ever-graying sky that was filled with clouds, and a bunch of dead mayflies that had gotten themselves trapped on the screen of the window. From this point onwards, all the joy and luck that we thought we were going to have on this trip immediately fell short. So I'm stretching out my legs from the car ride on the bed while playing on my phone, only to have my mother walk out of the bathroom claiming that the bottom of the toilet was leaking. Sure enough, there was a large puddle of water all over the bathroom floor surrounding the bottom part of the toilet. So that fucking sucks. We call it maintenance and they tell us that they will be fixing it in about an hour. That was fine for us because we were going to get some food anyways because it was like 6 and we were all starving. This is where we realized our mistake for not eating beforehand. So it turns out that on the non-busy days at the hotel, all the restaurants inside close. So we figured, okay, that's fine, we'll just look up some restaurants in the nearby area and figure out what we're gonna eat. All the while, the rain has started coming down pretty decently outside. So we're scrolling through trying to find anything within a couple miles radius and we start to realize another problem. Now I don't know what the fuck is the deal with y'all in Sandusky, but why in the fuck does everything close at like 7 on the dot? Of the limited things nearby, absolutely jack shit was actually open. So, instead of trying to find it, we decided that the best option was just to order some pizza from the local Domino's. So we called them up and placed our order and they asked for our location. And when we give it to them, a problem arises. You see, remember that rain that I was telling you about earlier? Well, apparently it had been coming down so hard that whatever route the driver would have to take to get into the peninsula was flooded or at the very least a flood risk. With no options left, we decided that the best thing to do would be just to go to the local supermarket and just buy some snacks for the night. After we got back to the room, we get told that the bathroom was fixed, so thank God for that. After we get done eating, we sit down to digest for a minute, and guess what decides to break again? Yeah, you know the drill. Call maintenance again, they say they'll fix it, and we move on. After that, with basically nothing else to do in the hotel, we head down to the indoor pool for like an hour, and then head back upstairs and watch some TV because there was just nothing else to do. I thought about maybe getting some extra exercise because my mom told me that the hotel had a room where you can run on the treadmill and lift some weights, and it seemed like it would be a fun time. So I head down there, turn the hallways of the hotel's fitness center, only to be disappointed with the most pathetic excuse for an exercise room in my entire life. What it wound up being was a couple of bikes, 2 medicine balls, and a bench with no weights around, not even dumbbells. The entire point of the room was just to check off the list of increasing the price of the hotel because there was absolutely no fun to be had in there. The moment I saw it, I just turned and walked away because it was just awful. The rest of the night, I just watched some of the garbage channels that the TVs at the hotel had to offer, maybe some YouTube on my phone until I went to sleep. Wow, such an exciting trip, huh? Well, get ready because that was only night 1 of our 3-night trip. The next morning I woke up at around 6:30 so that we could get to the park before anyone else. I ate breakfast in my room because, again, none of the hotel's restaurants would be open until that weekend and it was Friday, I believe. I look out the window to see the park and notice that absolutely nothing is moving. None of the coasters were pulled out of their block breaks, there was no one heading to the park, it was completely barren. There was still a slight drizzle outside, but that wasn't anything to worry about because I was getting on those rides no matter what the weather was like outside. So, we get to the front gate, scan our tickets in, and start moving around. Now, as I had mentioned in the past video, I've been to Disney World on numerous occasions, and some of those moments had the absolute worst weather that Florida has had to offer, and we would still be able to get on plenty of rides throughout the day. So, think of my surprise when we walk into the park and nothing but a few restaurants and gift shops are actually open. Apparently, when there is a drop of rain outside, the entire park just shuts down and everything closes. Literally the only ride that was working was the Derby horses, which, yeah, I'm not even gonna bother. After about 10 minutes, we decided that our best bet was to just leave. As we were leaving, the park made an announcement that it would be closing at 11 anyway, so it's not like we would have to re-enter. When we got back to our hotel, we went to the front desk so that we could get a refund on our prepaid tickets. However, issues started coming up. Because we had entered the park, we had essentially used the ticket already, so we could not get a refund. After some dispute, the manager told us that we could get a free day at the park, but not a full refund. This was also an issue because we were heading back the second that we were done with the 3rd day, so having an extra ticket wasn't giving us anything back. About 10 minutes later, it was decided that the money for the ticket would be refunded back into the night at the hotel, so I guess we basically got the money back. After that monstrosity, now came the issue of finding something to do. Because not only did the hotel have nothing but a pool in terms of activities, but the entire surrounding area had nothing to do either. Sandusky is like the most boring place to have a theme park because there's literally nothing to do in the rest of the town. After a couple of hours of meandering around, the weather clears up at mid-afternoon and we take a walk along the beachfront. And this is the part that I will never forget. So we get knocked around by pretty strong winds that had accumulated and noticed something lying along the beach. And here's where I found out about drowning fish. So apparently when there is rain outside or a lot of clouds have accumulated over Lake Erie, the oxygen levels in the water drops. And basically, what happens then is that a bunch of the fish essentially drown. Like they all suffocate from the lack of oxygen and then just wash up on the beach. And there were a lot of carcasses. They were really gross looking too because they all looked like they had been like hollowed out from the previous night's weather. It was absolutely disgusting. There were a couple of dead birds too, which, God, that's terrible. So apart from that, we just walked all the way until the path stopped on the beach, and we could see what is now the defunct Wicked Twister, and then we went over to where the second hill of Magma was. After that, we just went to our rooms again, sat for a little bit in the pool, and then went and got some ice cream from a shop that was open downstairs. It was during this time that we got a little lost in the hotel trying to find this place because it was in some back corner that we weren't used to. So we're walking down the corridors, following the signs, and not passing by a single soul, and then all of a sudden the lights go out. Are you fucking kidding me? The lights going out only lasted for maybe a couple of seconds, but it was definitely freaky when it did. And once the lights came back on, our luck turned around for the most part. So the ice cream shop was just around the corner and there was no one in line waiting. After some talk with the lady at the counter about what had just happened, we all ordered our ice cream. I wound up ordering the hot fudge brownie sundae because I just had a taste for chocolate for some reason, and the woman kind of started getting nervous. Apparently she had never worked in that area before and had to figure out how to make a sundae. How the fuck do you not know how to make a sundae? It's literally just the brownie ice cream and hot syrup. I know this because that's literally all she did, but she was acting like it was the most complicated shit in the world. Once I took a bite of that sundae, however, it was like heaven had just hit my lips. To this day, it is probably the best ice cream dessert that I have ever had. I've tried a couple of other places, and not a single one of them have held up to what I've eaten on that day. After a couple of hours, we started to get hungry, and with no rain on the radar and clouds starting to clear up, we called Domino's again. This time they told us that they would be able to deliver and came over after about 30 minutes. After all the bullshit that we had went through, we rewarded ourselves for a second time that night with drinks at the hotel bar. I'm not 21, so I didn't get to drink like the rest of my family, but I was able to get a virgin pina colada, so that was pretty cool. Some more TV watching later, and the day is ended. So our third day begins much in the same way that the second one did, except this time we actually saw the rides moving. We head down to the parks, get attacked by a swarm of mayflies again because yeah, they're back, and get to the gate an hour before it opens because that's one of the actually good perks of staying in the breakers. Except even then it was pretty shitty because they don't start testing the rides until after the park opens. Essentially 45 to 60 minutes that you get to go to the park earlier are basically spent walking to the front of the line for whatever ride you want to get on and waiting for it to open. With there still being a pretty high wind, most of the coasters were going to remain shut for the entire day, but that's whatever, we probably wouldn't have gone to everything the first day anyways. A quick little side note, I have issues with riding larger roller coasters because I did not like the feeling of drops when I was younger, so I've kind of kept with that to this day, so a lot of what the park had to offer was a bit of a challenge for me. Throughout the day though, I was able to push through and make it onto just about every ride that was open at the time. We started off on Corkscrew and worked our way to the biggest ride that day, Maverick, which was probably my favorite ride of the entire trip. Not much else actually happened at the park for the rest of the day, except for one thing. Now, remember how I had said that it was still pretty windy outside? Well, it was still pretty awful by the end of the day, and our last ride of the evening was a walk on to Wicked Twister. Most people probably know this, but water and shorelines tend to make the wind feel a lot worse, and Wicked Twister's location was right up against the shoreline. And what had essentially happened was that I had experienced wind whip. For those of you who don't know, it's basically when you get hit with so much wind at once that it leaves a burn on your skin. Basically imagine a sunburn, but coming from the full force of the wind itself. By the end of the ride, my entire face was completely red and stinging, so that sucked. Afterwards, we headed back to the hotel. The hotel was noticeably a lot busier today as the pool had reached maximum capacity and we had to wait an hour before we get into the hotel's TGI Fridays. After about as good of a meal as you can get at Fridays, the day basically ended. Our third day was our final day of the trip. We actually got to eat some regular breakfast for once at the hotel's main restaurant and headed to the park. Hello park, hello coaster, hello mayflies, oh god. By this point we had loaded up the car with our luggage because we knew that we weren't going to want to pack it later. We didn't ride too many things on this day. My sister got to finish up the last coasters that the park had to offer except for I think 3. And I got to ride a couple of rides because I just wasn't feeling like riding anything big that day. The 3 biggest rides of my sister's day were Steel Vengeance, Millennium, and Top Thrill. Whereas mine were Magnum, a second ride on Maverick, and Gemini. At only around 4, we decided to leave because we were just exhausted. Of course, I did my normal road trip routine of sitting in the back, putting in my headphones, and zoning out. So that was a fairly long summary of my first ever trip to Ohio and Cedar Point. Would I go again? Sure, but not without some prior planning at first. Basically the only good part about Breakers was the location, everything else was either mediocre or completely sucked. But considering the fact that the express version was pretty far away and looked more like a Holiday Inn, I'd still say Breakers is worth it if it's the only other option. There was another hotel with a water park inside that was close by, but it was under construction so we had no other choice. All in all, decent park, pretty meh hotel for the price, and I never want to see a mayfly ever again. Anyways, I hope you all enjoyed my story, and I will catch you all later.